Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to our info session today. Really glad to have you all here. You're tuning in, whether you're with us on Facebook Live, on our Zoom webinar, or if you're watching on YouTube. This is the Human Resources Management Diploma Program, live online info session for Ashland College. My name is Jabeen Boga. I'm with the Marketing and Communications team here at Ashland College. Really excited to have you all here. And I'm also joined by several colleagues. We have Matthew on the back end doing all of our Zoom webinar moderation. We also have Rita from Student Services, who's here to answer any admission questions you may have. And I have Jabeen, who is our HR instructor, who will be answering all of your questions about the program. And I'm really excited to be able to interview you today. So welcome, Jabeen.
Thank you so much. Excited to be here today.
Awesome. I also just want to give a little shout out for our attendees on Zoom. So we have several ways you can engage with us today. We have a chat box if you have any questions there or comments. We also have a Q&A box where you can input your questions, which either Rita will answer if they're regarding admissions, or I'll then be able to ask them live and incorporate them into the session. And there's also a raise hand function. At the end of the session, we will go to a live Q&A. So if you have a microphone set up, then we can hand over the microphone and let you ask your questions live as well. So just before we dive into the program itself, Jabeen, welcome. I was hoping you could give us a little bit of background just about your career and education and what brought you to your current role with Ashland College.
Definitely. So I started off in human resources over 10 years ago. Time is flying. I ended up, prior to graduating from university, doing a co-op term. So I was doing accounting and I thought, I'm not really passionate so much about numbers like this. So I did a co-op term, which was in marketing. And so I was trying to determine marketing, accounting, what should I do? And it was actually true HR function role. So you did sales. Once you did a certain amount of sales, you got promoted to a team lead. And in that role, I was doing essentially a full HR function where I was recruiting, I was training and developing, I was developing incentive plans. So I was really lucky to get so much exposure from a co-op term. Through that experience, I determined that I loved HR. So that's how I got involved in it. And I never looked back since. So then I decided to specialize the rest of my degree, because I was third year then, in human resources, graduated, and then I joined KPMG, which was fantastic. In my role at KPMG, accounting firm, I was doing quite a bit of orientation, onboarding, and then HR generalist functions like employee relations, dealing with unions, all of that kind of stuff. After that, I went to TD, so more progressive role as a HR manager for Western Canada, doing more employee relations. While I was at TD, I was doing a lot of panelist things with all these different, with CPHR primarily, CPHR Canada, CPHR BC and Yukon, and I really liked it. So when I saw an opportunity arise at Ashton, I thought, I'm doing CPD, continuing professional development already. Why don't I look at teaching? So I joined Ashton back in 2014, and I've taught every module at least 4 times.
Wow.
and, and I learned so much from the students. So the first module, I learned just as much from the students as they learned from me, and just continued that way where it was reciprocal learning. What's really cool at Ashton is that there's all different levels. So some people with zero HR experience, some people with progressive HR experience, and all different industries. So some people, they've worked as admin, or they've worked as an engineer, or, they've only worked in customer service before. So you get all these different arrays of experiences and perspectives. So when it comes to teaching, I try to make it as interactive as possible. You're able to see everyone's different backgrounds and really shed light when we're doing discussions and Q&A.
I love that. Thank you so much. And it is really fascinating how you point out that there are all of those different backgrounds. And it sounds like you left accounting in a sense, but you sort of stayed in financial services within the realm of HR, which is really interesting as well.
Yeah, so I always say HR is twofold. There's industry, but there's qualifications as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And now I know you covered a little bit while you were talking about your background and just some of the different areas you worked within HR. But just to uh, give a foundational context, in case we have some folks joining us who say they have very little experience in
Yeah.
HR, what does the human resources field entail?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So within human resources, there are so many different specializations, and often people aren't aware of that. They say, I'm joining human resources because I like people. And that's fantastic, but there's so many different things you can do, or you can generalize. So there is areas of, for example, payroll and benefits where you manage all the pay and you manage all the benefits like extended health care, dental, all of that, and pension plans. There is a designation that you get associated with that as well, but you need to have an understanding before you even do that. What's really cool about Ashton is they have courses in all of these areas, and then you can determine what you like and what you don't like. Because as I go through this, you might say, well, I don't know what payroll entails. Then another piece is recruitment, where you're doing interviewing. So a lot of HR generalists, which is a mixed bag of everything, they have 20% recruiting functions, or you can do 100%. This is where you see companies like Robert Half, Miles Employment, Kelly Services, they're external recruiting firms. But within big companies, like at my current company in Toronto, we have about 20 recruiters working for us internally. And what they're working on is anytime there's a vacancy, they're trying to fill that role. So if I were to leave the company tomorrow, they would try to fill my position.
Mhm.
So a recruitment officer or recruitment recruiter, they interview and they try to fill roles. Um, at Ashton, I teach the recruiting and staffing course as well. And I had I'd say about 80% of my course are like, I really want to become a recruiter. After the course, and they really got to see what it entailed, I would say about out of the class, 7 or 8 of them said, I don't want to do this because they found out
Mm.
what yeah. So they thought that it was a little bit of everything. They didn't realize how much you're really sourcing and filling pipelines. So like I said, you get really in-depth knowledge and you get that practical exposure, not only from myself, but often from other students in the class too. They can share their experiences. So you have recruitment, then you have employee relations, which is all about legislation with employment law. So employment standards, each province has its own. And although I'm based in BC, I go through a high level overview of each of the provinces. In my current role, I handle all of Western Canada. So like Manitoba, Saskatchewan, BC, Alberta. So you need to be familiar with all of them. In a lot of HR roles, they're regionally based, and some of our students are from out east and from all over Canada. So I try to always highlight the differences between Canadian provinces. And as an HR professional, it's really important to be aware of those differences too.
Absolutely. It sounds like that would give you mobility too as a working professional to have the knowledge, across Canada of what the different regulations are.
Definitely in this day and age, that would help to your competitive advantage as well when you're looking to
Mhm.
interview, saying that you are aware of the differences. You don't have to have it memorized, but just that you know that there are differences. There are
Mhm.
websites that I will share with everyone when we do those lectures that provide you the resources. So employment law is all about employee relations, how to performance manage, how to discipline, and then labor relations is covered in the same course. And that talks about unions and how to correspond with unions and everything necessary. Um, then another course is about organizational effectiveness. So we talk about how to align HR to the business to ensure best practices.
Okay.
Some of the students that took that course, some that were in HR, they applied a lot of the stuff that we covered, which is so cool. And some that weren't actually used some of the experiences and the examples that we shared in their interviews.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. And then we start off with professional practices. And what that one is it goes through CPHR, it talks about the designation, it talks about the resources available to HR professionals, and it really sets the tone and the infrastructure for the rest of the diploma program. We have total rewards, which I talked about, employee and labor relations, recruitment, organizational effectiveness, and then we have one on training and development as well, where As an HR generalist, there are lots of training and development opportunities like onboarding, ongoing training, and a lot of it falls on us as HR professionals. But there are actually roles that are 100% committed to developing training and development. And that falls within HR. That's 100% learning and development where you are a facilitator, but you're also creating all the materials. So at TD, we had about 20 people within our BC team that did that, and each province had about 20 people, and all they did was training and development.
Amazing. And it sounds actually fairly radical the way you describe it, that you could, have this generalist information about HR, or you could specialize 100% in onboarding or in training and development.
Yeah,
Um, I feel like,
definitely.
yeah, it kind of breaks down the expectations that people would have if they didn't know much about HR and were curious about the program but didn't really know where to start. Just to see
Yeah.
this, it's wide open.
And each of the modules goes through a different area of HR. So whether you say, okay, I want to do what she's talking about, which is a little bit of everything, well, you get exposure to a little bit of everything. If you think you want to specialize in one, like recruitment, you get exposure to it. I also do a technology piece for HR and technology because there is a role in human resources information systems where you may design and create it. So I talk about that as well. I talk about spin-offs, and I talk about either even further educating yourself with designations. Most common is the CPHR designation.
Right. Awesome. So I'm also curious, in your opinion, who would benefit from taking a program like this?
I think a lot of people who are looking to start a career in HR, to transition within HR, or to do a management role. So often in organizations, they look for people who have that employee experience, that have that people manager experience. And by taking this course, it demonstrates that you understand human resources for even a general operations manager role. A lot of people aren't sure what in HR they want to do, or they think they want to do a particular area. I think that definitely benefits. And one of the biggest perks I find is that by taking the diploma program, it waives the need to write the NKE, which is the National Knowledge Exam. So the CPHR designation is very, very prestigious. A lot of job descriptions that you'll see will say mandatory CPHR designation or pursuing it. Um, if you know anything about accounting, everywhere it says CPA, you need that designation, or finance, CFA. So for HR professionals, it's CPHR, and they're looking for that commitment and that dedication. Now, I can tell you when I wrote, it was really challenging because you have no idea what to expect with the National Knowledge Exam. I had to study everything, and I spent years, like at least a year studying. With this diploma program, it says that you're learning all the knowledge. It certifies that you possess all the knowledge. Therefore, you don't have to write the national knowledge exam, and you just have to get the experience component, which is 3 years. A
Wow.
lot of Yeah, and a lot of students ask me questions in the course about how to get the 3 years, and I have guest speakers or I address it myself because I actively volunteer with CPHR Canada.
Amazing. Thank you
Yeah,
so much.
yeah,
Yeah.
no.
Sounds like a huge range of people that could benefit from the program.
Yeah, because a
That's
lot of
great.
people feel relief that by taking this diploma program, they don't have to write the NKE. But like I mentioned, a lot of people take it for other reasons, which is exposure to HR, or knowing or thinking they want to get experience in one area, but then realizing, this isn't what I thought it was.
So I also just want to give a little shout out because I noticed our attendee numbers are going up. If you just joined us, whether you're on Facebook Live or the Zoom webinar, or if you're watching on YouTube, you can ask us any questions on Facebook Live. Just leave us a comment and we'll be sure to address it during the session. If you are on Zoom, you can use the question and answer box, or you can use the chat box, and we can ask your questions live. And Jabeen, we actually do have two questions that I think we might as well jump over to from
Wonderful.
some attendees. So one is a technical question, um, just around the differences in opportunities between an HR diploma and an HR degree. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So with the HR diploma, so at Ashland College with the HR diploma, it's accredited. So by getting the HR diploma, you're able to bypass the NKE. And with the HR diploma, the other thing that I find is that a lot of the instructors, we work in the field of HR. So I work full time. Working at Ashton is in supplement to my current job. It works out really well because of the flexibility. So a lot of classes in the evening, so I can work during the day, including today. Um, so one of the things that you have is not just myself, but our full complement of instructors are in the field, so we're up to date. So if something changes with legislation, something changes in any aspect of HR, we are aware of it because we're doing it every day. So we need to be aware of it. The other piece, so we have the updated skills, but the other piece is that we share these real life examples. So I keep everything confidential. I'm not like, oh, employee ABC at this location. So we keep everything confidential, but students find that they benefit quite a bit from that. So the practicality, the real life examples really, really help. But the other piece is that Ashton is accredited. Not all of the degree programs are accredited. So I went to SFU, it was not accredited. So that's why I wrote the NKE exam. You have to check with each post-secondary education program, whether diploma or degree, if they're accredited and if CPHR chooses to recognize them. There are qualifications and there are metrics that CPHR does because I sit on the post-secondary board to determine whether or not they meet the criteria. And if they do, then they get a special accreditation, which will be on their website. If they don't, then you still have to write the NKE. The beauty of their accreditation is that they say you're meeting all the competencies of the HR profession. Degree, is great, but you can go just as far, if not further, with a diploma. So my boss, who's a national director, has a diploma and is a national director. So I think
Amazing.
it's yeah, so I think it's more about the content and what the course has. What's really cool is we offer demo classes and other things, so you can really see what it's like to take a course. And this one kind of shows you, the Q&A, the interactions. This is what it would be, but with course content.
Mhm. Thank you. I think that really clearly answers the questions. We did have some questions for Priya and Veronica. Veronica, since it is specific about courses that you've taken in the past, Rita is recommending that you ask in the question and answer box so that she can respond to you privately or to call in. Anything specific about your educational experiences or your own admission case, Rita can help with that individually. And Priya also asked just about job placement or internship within the program. Jabeen, I feel like you covered that a little bit when you talked about bringing guests in and
Yeah.
having the real world experience.
Yeah, so the other thing that I do is that a lot of the students and I from teaching since 2014 are still in touch. So sometimes they message me on my Ashton email and they just say, hey, I'm looking for this or I need help with that. And it's not just me, it's other instructors as well. And we're more than happy to help you and how to get an internship. So a lot of times you can actually search for internships and we can give you the tools and the technology and resources as to where to find it. So Ashton doesn't formally provide co-ops terms or internships, but the instructors will assist you in acquiring one and the steps that it takes to do so. So what I would say for your question is that connect with your instructor when you are taking a course and just say, hey, how do I go about getting an internship? And as I mentioned, we're all in the field of HR, so we are abreast and are aware of all of the procedures on how to get it.
Amazing, thank you.
Yeah.
And so attendees, we'll keep coming back to your questions regularly. Jabeen, I have a couple more questions on my list for you. Um, I was curious, I feel like you've talked about the general structure of the program. Could we talk about your teaching style a little bit and just what to expect?
Yeah, so my teaching style is very interactive. What I try to do is I involve theory, but I also involve practical examples. I also integrate audiovisual. So I'll integrate case studies, I'll integrate various videos and clips. And then what we do is say I'll be presenting a topic, let's say about employment law, and it's a very dry topic, right? Not everyone's favorite subject. But what I would do is I would say, okay, this is employment standards. This is what it entails, like minimum hours of work, all of that. I'll go through all the theory behind it and I'll say, these are the links and I post it as well. So every time I chat about something, I post it on the discussion board. So prior to the class, I would have posted it. If you didn't have a chance to look at it, it's still there. And I often blog afterwards to say, hey, here's a clip. What are your thoughts on this? So it reinforces the learning. But in going back to in class, I might share a real life example through a case study. And I try to keep it short. I don't want to have a 20-page case study, something that we can go through in class, or an actual video with a scenario. And I would say, okay, based on this, what would you do? And so I prepare questions for you before the video. I ask you after the video, and we have an interactive discussion. And students are free to use the chat box or their headset, whatever they prefer. And then we chat through various scenarios. So I always try to have real life examples. There's one that I do about desirable behavior, how to move undesirable to desirable behavior. So I give an example of an employee. It's a clip, and the employee's at a burger shop and she's doing everything wrong. She literally has everyone on hold, and she's on her personal cell phone. And so it's quite interesting. And then I say, how do you change this undesirable to desirable behavior using the techniques we discussed? And people are like, job shadowing. They throw out all these terms that you may not all be familiar with, but it really is real life application as we are learning. So when you go, by the end of the course, you know everything. You can transfer it to your workplace or be able to apply the knowledge whenever, because you'll remember that burger example. You'll remember those clips I showed you.
It sounds super practical.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and students can ask questions at any point in time throughout the lecture that they may have, or they may have thought of things after the fact, which they can definitely post. What was really interesting is during the teacher strike a few years ago, some of you may remember that, we shared it in the blog, and I said, okay, well, what do you, in our actual classroom, there's a discussion board, and I shared it, and I said, what do you think about this? So even real life scenarios that are going on, we talk about it. We talk about economics, everything. So it's really awesome.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah.
So we do have two more questions on the go that we can address. One is just very practical around, are there any textbooks for the course?
Definitely. So there are textbooks. Each course has its own, and they're regularly updated. So what I mean by that is we try to make sure that the textbooks are current and that they're relevant. So we do have textbooks. There are one or two that do not yet have textbooks, and that's because for employment law, it's really hard to say use this textbook because everything's on employment standards or human rights. So in that case, what I do is every class has a course outline before, and it says all the pre-readings. So every week there's a link that I share, and I say this is what you need to do. So you have a high level overview of all the links, but then I also share it. So any courses that may not have a textbook, I would then supplement with a lot of information. So I think that right now there's one without a textbook, but every single other one has a textbook.
Oh, thank you. I feel like your organizational principles are coming through very clearly when you describe the course outlines.
And the other thing is, even if the course is a textbook, we still supplement with a lot of relevant information. It's not like you're constantly reading and studying. I don't want you to think that, but it might just be a chart or a graphic, or it might be like, hey, take a look at this article. So we always will supplement to reinforce learning and make sure that you're aware of how it affects each province.
Awesome. So I was also looking at the course objectives. I noticed that it mentioned diverse forms of adaptation to a changing environment. Could we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so, sorry, it mentions diverse forms of
adaptation to a changing environment.
Yeah, so definitely. So when new legislation comes place, what I always try to do is I update it. So like I was telling you about that strike, but if there's anything like with WorkSafe BC, they implemented new law on harassment. And they implemented new law about what qualifies as bullying and how that is a workplace incident. So if you worked in healthcare, for example, and you, this is happening because I work in healthcare currently. I was in finance banking, now I'm in healthcare. So we have people, sometimes unfortunately they see death. And when you see someone who's just passed away, it's very tough, very emotional. You have a reaction, and one of the reactions is trauma. That is a stress-induced reaction caused by the workplace. So that's why it becomes HR related. So something like that, there are forms, there are procedures, there are processes that we follow. So what I do is I make sure by staying abreast of all of this is I update the course regularly with new materials and say this is an addendum. When there was different things about sexuality, like transgendered and things like that, that was very relevant. So I updated everyone in the employment law course, which is employee and labor relations. So we always are updating, even if the textbook is not yet updated, we would definitely share it. The strikes that I told you about, for organizational effectiveness, we talked about global mobility, and when a lot of the laws, like if you remember between Trump and Trudeau, the steel was a big issue and the steel costs and pricing. We talked about that and how it impact labor. Because
Amazing.
costs, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, my voice is a little quiet. Sorry about that. I will try to speak a little bit louder. Um, so, Jabeen, we have another great question from an attendee. What kind of people would you recommend a career in human resources to?
So it really depends on the area you want to specialize in. Some people think that you have to be super, super outgoing to pursue a career within HR, but that's not necessary. What it depends on is what is your passion? And you may have had exposure through the workplace where you did payroll, for example, one time, and you say, I love it. You may have an exposure through a volunteer experience where you said, I loved interviewing. But I think for me, the biggest element is once you take each module, we talk about what it would look like in real life. What would this position look like in real life? And once you determine that, you may say, yes, I have the characteristics, because a lot of HR is behind the scenes. People think it's all, oh, you're presenting all the time or you're interviewing all the time. But if you are doing an HR generalist role where you're doing a little bit of everything, you have a wide stream of exposure. Often I'm interacting with one or two people, not 30 at the same time.
Mhm.
So I think it really depends on what area of HR you choose to specialize in and what career path within HR you choose to do.
Awesome, thank you.
No problem.
Hopefully you can all hear me okay now. Um, yeah, Jimmy, another aspect of the course description mentioned health and safety in the workplace and monitoring that within the HR role. Could you give us an example of that?
Definitely. So health and safety, we discuss in organizational effectiveness. We discuss it a little bit more in employment law in terms of the legal policies and procedures. With health and safety in the workplace, often this falls on the HR function. So in my current role, it's part of my job. Even regardless of what level you're at, there is some sort of component. So what we do in the course is we talk about all the resources available, the boards that regulate occupational health and safety. We talk about what health and safety touches upon, which I just mentioned, like trauma, bullying, harassment, all of that is within occupational health and safety as well. But there are other elements too that fall within it. So we go through in a high level, and then we talk about when an injury happens, regardless of the province, there are certain procedures you need to take. Like it needs to be reported. What are employees accountable for? What is the employer accountable for? What happens with hazardous materials? What happens with all of those types of elements? What happens if it's not reported in a timely manner? And what legalities can be imposed on a company? So we hear about construction sites often, and when someone passes away at a construction site, what happens in those aspects? Well, there are fines, there are penalties. If you're required to wear steel toe shoes, what happens if an employee doesn't follow the process, doesn't follow the proper behavior? In this day and age with COVID, doesn't matter what province you're in, masks are mandatory for most workplaces. So if someone's not wearing a mask, what do you do? So we would use relevant examples like that because now it's a workplace issue. And so we'll talk about workplace investigations, employer obligations with regards to training and development from a health and safety perspective as well. So we go through all that, and then what type of training you need to do, first aid kits, all of that. A lot of it is subject to change, so I direct you to the resources and I do an overview. And then, like I told you, I would do a chart where I'd show you provincial differences.
Awesome, thank you. um, One of my favorite questions to ask for any course or program that we offer is what do you think students will enjoy most about the experience?
I think they'll enjoy the different learning styles. So we integrate so many different things. So like I said, you have the textbook, you have the PowerPoint. Now the PowerPoint that I create is not from the textbook. It's integrated with everything. So I have theory from the textbook. I have case studies. I have my own practical examples. I ask various things. So if we go back to the employee relations course, employee and labor relations, I give you a hypothetical scenario and then I say, what would you do in this situation? And it really causes you to apply the knowledge. So you learn the theory, then I ask you a question, you're immediately applying the knowledge, and then you watch a clip about employment law or how to file a complaint. So what's really cool is there's within, I'm just talking about a span of maybe 45 minutes, there's so many different styles. So I find that really awesome. Other thing is the questions that you can ask. So as you're learning, if a particular style doesn't work for you, you can say, okay, well, what was I supposed to catch from that video? We'll always debrief. And then all the instructors, we have informal office hours. So I'm available to explain things to you even outside of lecture. So I think that that's what people really enjoy. And they enjoy, like I mentioned, the different learning styles while in class, the ability to use the chat function, but also the availability of instructors so that, sometimes you're deer in headlights, kind of like when you don't realize you have a question and you realize after the fact, you can bring it to the next lecture or you can bring it before then. So they enjoy that about the teaching style, that it's not just, this is our class time and once we're off, we're off. I'm still available.
Absolutely, and I can really see why so many of your students would stay in contact with you even after they graduated from the program. Just having that open conversation and being able to come to you for guidance on whatever topic they're struggling with. That's amazing. It's also something I've heard from most of the instructors I've chatted with. The interactive nature of the live online classes, and then also, yeah, the outside of class time support from instructors is huge for anyone considering taking a program with Ashton. Um, let's move over to another question. So I'm curious on just some of your thoughts, Jabeen, on the current demand and the current workforce, and looking at how vital are human resources professionals moving forward.
I think they're essential. So some people say, I'm really worried with COVID and the pandemic and cutting the workforce. What will that look like for HR professionals? Because sometimes they're seen as supplement. But one of the things that you need to understand is that HR is a strategic resource. So even if a company is downsizing, they're looking at re-strategizing. And in order to re-strategize or realign, because a lot of companies have shifted their business, they've shifted their product lines. Like, who would have thought a lot of companies are going to switch to making sanitizers and masks, right? A lot of companies have changed their focus from what they were producing to changing something else, or the market they catered to a new market. And in order to change that strategy, they need to ensure that the business is realigned as well. So what we need to do from an HR perspective is we need to figure out where are ways that we can diversify. So they're looking at HR professionals in order to support that, whether it is training and development, whether it is in law, whether it is in recruitment, because they're looking for a different type of capacity of employees as well. So I think now more than ever, they're looking for HR professionals and they're looking for them from a strategic point of view.
It sounds like having expertise in HR, that's going to really help an organization be able to pivot direction and be able to assess and restructure as needed.
Yeah,
Um,
and even if you're thinking, okay, well, I don't know if I necessarily want to be in HR, maybe I want to be a general manager for, any departmental store or at head office or whatever you may want to do, having that HR element greatly helps because it shows that you know how to align employees to the business. So regardless of the position, they are looking for some understanding of HR. At TD, if anyone wanted to be a departmental manager, so branch manager, so going into a branch, the actual branch manager, they had to have done 1 year in HR. So working at HR role, because they said if you're going to be a branch manager, you need to have exposure to all the elements of HR. So by doing the role, you know it well and you know what resources are available. So by you having the diploma program, if you go into HR and you don't want to go into it, or, you know, for whatever reason you land an operations manager role, having exposure will help you on your resume, even if it is through course, because as I mentioned, there's that practicality element. In a lot of interviews, they ask you behavioral or situational questions. So you want to have that.
Okay, for sure. Thank you. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like that really accurately talks about what what many industries are going to look like moving forward with change. Absolutely. So we have a couple more questions from attendees, and also I just want to shout out for anyone on Facebook Live. If you are commenting, we can address those questions as well. So one of the questions, no, this is very specific. The question was about the statistic for how many of our Ashton College diploma students are employed after graduation. Now, we may not have that statistic right now, but I would love to rephrase that in terms of an anecdote. Jabeen, could you reflect on the students that you've kept in touch with? What kind of successes do you see for grads?
Definitely. So some of the students that I've stayed in touch with, one actually reached out to me recently. He landed a HR generalist role for a construction company, but I have some students that work for Amazon. Actually, two of my students work for Amazon. One works as a HR manager. She's worked her way up from HR coordinator all the way up. Another one works as a recruiter at Amazon. I have other individuals who've chosen to specialize in payroll, other ones who have done recruitment, other ones who were already in HR but advanced their career to the next level. I have some students that were from India and other places of the world that were looking for Canadian exposure. Through being able to speak about it, they were able to then transfer into other areas or land a job in Canada, which is fantastic, at a higher level than entry. So a lot of them have chosen to do recruitment roles, payroll roles, training and development, for TELUS, for example. So a lot of big companies, some chose not-for-profits like the Cancer Society. So quite a bit have been really, really successful. Some have reached out to me for references as their instructors. Some have reached out to me to inform me of roles they're considering and what it entails. So I'm just so proud of my students. Like a lot of them have done really, really well.
Amazing. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like that really accurately addresses that. We have another technical question just about how the course is laid out. So the question is from Veronica. Do we learn one course at a time, or do you take all of the courses at the same time during the program?
No, that's a great question. So you take one at a time, and each course is approximately, I'd say, about 6 weeks or so, give or take. If there's stat holidays and things like that, that results in a little bit longer. And we typically meet twice a week for an hour and a half each class, um, and that goes on for 6 weeks. And then once that module's done, you start the next module. So it you can go back to back. Some people they choose to take a break, come back, but usually you take them all back to back. And what's really cool about that as well is a lot of the students they'll create WhatsApp groups or Facebook groups and they all stay in touch and you go along the program together. And they really enjoy that because they have each other's resources. So typically what's also really awesome is you don't have the same instructor for all of the modules. You might have them repeated. Like for example, I might teach you module 1, module 4, module 6, like recruitment, staffing, and that kind of stuff. And you get different teaching styles too. Typically it's similar to mine, but you're able to get different backgrounds, different experience. So a lot of students enjoy that variety too.
Great, thank you. Um, we have another question from Danielle. This is a great question about whether or not there's any quizzes or tests or exams involved in the courses.
No, definitely great question. So every instructor does their course outline slightly differently. We go through it at the very first class and we talk about what it will look like. What will the curriculum look like? We have to get it approved from Ashton, so I can't be like one quiz is worth 100%. We use our discretion. Hopefully the instructors know better than that because we go through a rigorous interview process to get a job at Ashton. So basically what we do is we create what our course outline will look like. For example, how many quizzes will there be? How many there'll be one final exam, and then are there going to be any presentations, or are there going to be any assignments? I try to mix it up so it's not like you have a quiz every week. I try to mix it up. I call the quiz midterms, and they're a little bit more comprehensive, because if I quiz you too often, I may not have enough material. So I try to, and I don't want it to be so in depth, like on page 22, what did this say? I want it to be more applicable for understanding of knowledge. So I would definitely have at least 3 quizzes or midterms, so to speak, and one final exam and one assignment. But it's not like I just say, here's assignment, good luck. We go through it in class. I have it posted in advance. We then, to give you a chance to review, we then review in class. And then I ask you the following class, literally the same week, and it's not due that week, it's due like 2 to 3 weeks later. Do you have any questions? And then I make sure that everyone's available, everyone knows that I'm available to reach out. So for example, CJ could call me and say, okay, for the assignment, this is what I'm thinking. Am I on the right path? Do you have any ideas? Do you have anything? And the rubrics, as well as the outline of the assignment, goes through exactly what's necessary. And then, like I said, we also go through it in class to provide in-depth answers twice in class.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So Danielle, yeah, hopefully that answers your question really clearly. Matthew, did we have any outstanding questions on Facebook Live that we could address?
No questions from Facebook Live.
Okay, awesome. We've got lots more questions on the list. So this is a really fun one that I always like to ask, and we actually had a student ask it, or an attendee ask as well, about what makes Ashland College stand out as a choice. Maybe they're considering doing an HR program at a couple of different schools, and in your opinion, why should they choose Ashland?
So I already spoke about the NKE. The accreditation from CPHR is huge. If you're looking to pursue the CPHR designation, you don't have to write the NKE exam. Not all post-secondary institutions are accredited. So for example, I'm not going to mention other names, but other institutions don't necessarily have that. So that's one of the things I would definitely do as my homework if that's a designation you're looking to get. If you are serious about HR, regardless of whether you specialize or not, I would 100% say get the designation. That's the first thing I did upon graduating from SFU, is I said, how am I going to get this designation? Second thing is, all the instructors, we work in the field of HR. So I mentioned that to you earlier, whether it's full-time or part-time, we have some sort of or consulting, we have some sort of exposure, which means that we're applying the knowledge. And if you say, okay, well, who cares if someone's retired? They at least, they've had exposure, but our exposure is valid and current. So we're aware of all the changes. We're very, very well versed. So that's another element. And the third is we bring the practicality. We bring examples. So like I told you, I bring audiovisual, I bring clips. That's all great in terms of learning style. That's also great about Ashton, is we bring so many different styles. But the fourth is that we actually bring real life examples. We don't share like Susie Sue did this, but we do share a general high level overview, which is fantastic. And then the last piece is the flexibility. Like I told you, I work full time, but I'm still able to teach at Ashton. And even some of the students that travel for work pre-COVID, they were able to, they'd be like, I'm in a hotel room in Victoria and I'm taking the course. So the flexibility that's offered is not all post-secondary institutions will offer this amount of flexibility. And if you miss 1 or 2 classes within reason, we're willing to do makeups with you. All our webinars are recorded so you can review it. So I tell people, because the quiz is not all based on memorizing the textbook, you can re-listen to the lectures, which is fantastic. And some people who are interviewing for roles, later on they say, later on in the module, they say, you know what, lecture 2, I really want to review lecture 2. Well, you can access it all module and for a few weeks, even after the module is completed. So a lot of courses don't allow that. A lot of post-secondary institutions don't allow that accessibility of the content for that long. And all our materials are posted in advance. So it's not like we're spoon feeding and saying 1 week's material, 1 week. It's all there for you. If I adjust something, I'll tell you, look, I adjusted, week 6 or whatever that I'm adjusting, but everything's there and ready for you.
I love that. And you actually answered another question that has come up in this session, and it comes up in so many of our info sessions around are the lectures recorded and can I watch them again on my own time? And it's absolutely a huge benefit of having that flexibility that you can self-study after the lectures.
Yeah, because some people, you may have a ill pet, you may have a child you've attend to, so you may step away and the students will message me and just say, I really have to do a diaper change. I need to step away for the next 20 minutes. If it happens every class, of course, I'd say, try to arrange some care or whatever it may be, or we may work it out amongst ourselves. But what's really cool is you can still pick up where you left off. So you'd look at the time, like 4:46, for example, you'd write it down and you know that you stepped away at that point, and you'd get to capture the lecture at your own convenience.
I love that. Thank you. We have another really good question just around enrollment. So I'm not sure if this would be a good question for you or maybe for our admissions team. Can someone start the modules later in the process? Say they missed the first one, but then they want to register and do 2 through the end of it. And then can they go back and do, say, module 1 or 2, pick it up the next time it's being offered?
I would say that's more of a Rita question to ask, Rita or Rika, to ask whether that's possible. I know some students may have to take a break. They may have, unfortunately, death in their family, an ill family member, maybe pregnant and giving birth and need to take time off. So I know there are these one-off situations where they say, okay, you've taken module 1 and 2, you need to take a break from module 3. I've seen it because I've taught for so long and I've seen a student, I'm like, oh, wow, you're back. But I don't know if you can jump around in order. That would be more of a Rita Rika. I'm talking about exceptional life circumstances that happen.
For sure. So I'll just say for that attendee who is asking that question, if you just want to follow up, you can always send us an email at info@ashlandcollege.ca, and then we'll be able to respond directly and look at your specific dates or any conflicts that you might have and be able to answer that for you. So I also just want to put this out to our attendees. Do we have any outstanding questions that you wanted to ask live? If you have your microphone, is there anyone who has a question they'd like to ask? If you do, you can always just drop us a comment or use the raise hand function, and you can ask your question live and we can address that. Jabeen, I have burned through so many of my questions on my list, and we've had so much engagement. Okay, so we have had this question come up twice, and I think it's fairly niche, but I'd love to put it out there. I think you can maybe just share your personal perspective on this. So a couple of attendees have brought up the fact that the program at Ashland is very condensed in terms of time. So it's not, 2, 3, or 4 years long. It's fairly condensed. And we were just curious about, are there any pros or cons to that? Would the material be substantially different than, say, the program that you did at SFU?
So what I find is really cool is that it's a lot more in depth. So it's 6 weeks, but it's a lot more in depth. It's not that you can't keep up. So don't think that I'm going to throw, 3 chapters a week at you. It's within reason. So I say, okay, I'm a full-time person and I'm a person who works full-time, and a lot of you are. Some of you may be parents, which is more than a full-time job for me. Some of you may be working full-time and also have 2 children or a family member or sibling or spouse that you're taking care of for whatever reason. So I get that people have a lot on their plate. So I say, okay, for a reasonable person, even if you didn't have any of those other circumstances, what is reasonable to learn? So we try to, apply, 1 to 2 chapters, which I think is fairly reasonable within 7 days, because remember, it goes from Monday to Sunday and then you start again each week. But because of the theory, the practicality, you're really applying the knowledge right away. Now with SFU, it was all theory. When I wrote the NKE exam, I was like, well, this is so difficult because you know, when you work a real life job, not everything is to the textbook. It's like, we don't have 20% females working here. What do we do? But the textbook said that employment law or employment equity law says that 20% have to be female. We don't have it. What do we do? You get lost. So because in our course we give real life examples and we say employment equity legislation states this, you go through the same thing at any degree program or any other diploma program. But what we then say is, this is what happens in real life. This is what happens when you're short. And we give you real life examples. So I think even though it's 6 weeks, it might seem overwhelming. Like, how am I going to do so much work in 6 weeks? We break it down into chunks. We also get you to apply the knowledge right away. So in class, we're giving you case studies. In class, we're giving you videos while we're doing the theory. And then, like I told you, I have a blog. It's not overwhelming because it will say, this is a situation at IKEA, a real life example that IKEA has. Here's one paragraph from it. Here's a link to 3 more paragraphs. What would you do? So you're constantly applying that knowledge, whether it's in class or on the blog. And if you didn't have a chance to read it because life was too busy, we discuss it in class. And I say, did everyone read that IKEA thing? What did you think? We discuss in the first 5 minutes of class. So I think that I understand how it can be overwhelming, thinking 6 weeks, I'm not going to be able to work. Like, I'll have to abandon my kids. But because of the teaching style and the way we conduct the lectures, it's so, you're still learning quite a bit, but because you're applying it so much, there's that practical element. Other thing is, I've had students say, your quizzes are 10 questions, we would prefer 6. And I've had some people say, your quizzes are 6 questions, we'd prefer 10. So I've seen both. And I've had some say that I would really love a little bit more theory than all these applicable, these application knowledge questions. And what's really cool is I'm not like, okay, CJ, I'm never going to talk to you again. I'm like, thank you for your feedback. How does the class feel? And then we do a poll, and I put a poll on the on our discussion board, and it's anonymous. I can't see who's voting where. You can only vote once, but it doesn't tell me who's voted where. Just like the election, like, you don't know who's voting, it's anonymous. So it will tell me exactly, like 10 people say keep the quiz as is, 4 say this, and 5 haven't participated, or whatever it may be. So we are constantly changing our course as we go along based on your feedback. Some classes I get 0 feedback. I ask people at lecture 3, how do you like things? How are things going? I ask them after the quiz. It's not that I'm going to bend over backwards and say, oh, you'd like me to give you all the answers before the quiz. Let's do that. But we're very open to feedback and suggestions. I've been teaching here for 6 years. I've taught at other places as well. I always come back to Ashland. But the one piece for me, the biggest piece for me, is making sure that we're constantly collecting your feedback, making sure that you're enjoying the course, evaluating and doing pulse checks, saying, how are we doing? And if there are quizzes every week, the instructor says quizzes every week, take the first one, see how you feel, and then give feedback and say, you know what, we feel that it should be less. And the instructor 99% of the time will be like, yeah. So we are very adaptable with it. And don't get scared by the 6-week number. Don't think it'll be too much. Don't think it'll be too little either. Think that it's going to be within reason. It's after work hours. It's flexible in that element, but we're applying the knowledge right away. So that will help us digest and absorb it. Does that answer the question for you, or do you need any more descriptions? Or
I think that's very clear, and I think you also addressed, I was really curious about what is the experience going to be like for someone that's working full-time or that has a family. And I think it's beautiful that you'll be able to relate as the instructor. Like you said, you're working full-time while teaching the class. What I'm hearing from you is that it's rigorous, but not overwhelming. That's, I think, the takeaway that I have on that.
You need to be prepared because you're learning, right? So anytime you're learning, you can't just think, I'll put my feet up and I'll learn. You have to do some work on your side too, right? So you have to understand that it's a two-way street. We'll provide you the information. You have to do some work. If you feel overwhelmed, you have to tell us. But also, like I said, you need to be prepared to learn. And it's not going to be overwhelming because we're all reasonable people. So we will definitely give you pre-readings and things to do, but it won't be so much that just because it's 6 weeks, it's a full textbook. I may only select certain chapters of the textbook, or I may say, it's your choice if you want to read it. This is an overview. I'm giving you an overview in class in this. If you want to read the chapter, feel free to. Remember, The tests are not regurgitation. I'm not saying on page 22 this. I'm not, because if you think about it, 2 years from now, are you going to remember what was on page 22? Are you going to remember every single detail? And the other thing for me is with employment law and human rights legislation, they're always changing. The biggest thing for you to know is, where do you get those resources? What does employment standards cover? What does human rights cover? Not what is every single legislation piece. We go through it, we discuss it, but you're not expected to memorize it, because you can just look it up. In the workplace, when I'm doing different provinces, and unfortunately when I'm doing a termination, I don't have every single province and the amount of notice period required for each like, supposed to be 1 week up to this amount. Each province is slightly different. I don't have that memorized, and it's constantly changing. I should not have it memorized, because what if I do it wrong? I need to know, where do I get that information? What am I looking for? How do I apply it? And that's the concepts we're providing, not memorization. So bear that in mind as well.
It's such a huge skill set to be able to find answers for yourself once you're working in the industry. And I think that's an amazing emphasis for the students to have. Yeah.
While I loved my degree, like one of the things is I didn't get that practical element. That's why I keep emphasizing it to you, because it was really tough. When I came into the workforce, there were all these situations, and I was like, but this isn't the box, this isn't, when you have a recipe, it's like, you crack 2 eggs, it's like, but I have 4. What do I do? Do I throw away 2? Like, not everything is going to be that specific to that theory. It's not going to be a recipe. In real life, and from your own lives, it's like, oh, well, I did it in this order. I did my life in this order, but it should have been that way. In hindsight, you're like, well, I should have found a house first where I would park my car, where I would do that. But I bought the car first, and I know where to park it. Like, life doesn't happen that way. And in HR, you are wearing multiple hats. Even if you're specializing, you're wearing 10 different hats. Within payroll, you might be doing benefits, you might be doing pension, whatever. You have to be able to roll with the punches. With HR, it's a lot of gray. So if you are doing everything cookie cutter, it's not going to work in HR. There is a lot of unknown, and you have to roll with the punches. So the biggest piece for me is, every day I have a to-do list. That to-do list, within an hour, I'm throwing it out and I'm making a new one, because there's urgent issues that I have to attend to. So with the practicality, you're able to at least gain exposure to what it would be like in real life, but also transfer that knowledge to the workplace, whether you're currently working or whether you're planning on working in this area or doing that HR generalist role. You're able to see what it really entails and remember where to get the resources. And then remember, you have the course outline with all the links that you've printed off, so you know where to get it from. So I think that's the biggest difference for me. And I think the 6 weeks, you shouldn't be scared of that number. Think that it's too overwhelming. Think that in 6 weeks, you're going to learn this material so well, and you're going to know it because of the different learning styles. Yeah.
Thank you.
No problem.
It's been such a pleasure talking to you and learning about this program. We've had so much engagement from the attendees. Love seeing that. Folks, if we didn't get to answer your question today, I'm so sorry, but you can absolutely reach out to us. You can still comment on Facebook or comment on YouTube. You can also give us a call at 604-899-0803 or reach out via email at info@ashtoncollege.ca. And our student services team will be able to respond to those questions. If there's any specific questions that you wanted to ask Jabeen that we didn't get around to, or if anything comes up after the fact, we can always forward those questions and get you the answers that you need. So with that, right before we wrap up, Jabeen, I would just like to pass the mic back to you and ask if there's any final words of insight or advice that you want to share with the attendees today.
When you're thinking of any post-secondary program, one of the biggest things, as I mentioned, is if you're interested in the CPHR, I've mentioned this a number of times, but I actually was on the board that wrote the NKE. I have pursued the CPHR designation when you had to write the NKE. It is very challenging. So if it is accredited, they not only recognize that you get to skip that step, but they also recognize that the college or the institution has all of those fundamentals, all of those competencies being met. So whether you decide Ashton or not, I'm not like, obviously I would prefer that you choose Ashton, but if you choose not to, make sure that the college is accredited or the university is accredited because within HR, a fundamental element is CPHR. No company will even consider you for a intermediate or above HR role without the CPHR. So knowing that, you know you'll need to get it eventually. Number two, Ashland provides a wonderful discount with CPHR BC and Yukon. Not all organizations do that. Like I told you, I sit on the CPHR board for post-secondary portfolio, so I know that. Number three is always look at the instructors and look at the bios. You can go to any school and you can see the bios, see what kind of experience they have. Are they well versed? Are they retired? Are they active in the field? You want instructors that have relevant experience that are teaching you, because if it's outdated, it's very hard when you are no longer in the field to stay active. So much has changed. So much is being thrown at you. I have constantly have to be versatile. I have to know everything. Like if occupational health and safety legislation is changing, I have to be on it. I have to know if there's something new applied to employment standards and all of that. With COVID, I'm so well versed about the benefits, because if an employee has COVID, what do you do? So I need to know that. And I need to know, we can't have them in the workplace. If someone refuses to wear a mask, what do we do? These are just some examples. So checking the bios is a big piece as well. And then seeing if you can do an interview with the college to find out or whatever post-secondary institution, to find out what is the teaching style of this college? What is the mandate? Like I told you at Ashton, I get an evaluation every single year. I've taught here for 6 years. I still get an evaluation every year, whether I want it or not. And I welcome it because I want to develop. But even if I didn't, I still have to get one. And one of the things that they do is they spot check our lectures. They're not on every single one, but they audit it. And one of the things they're looking for is interaction. Is it me just speaking at you? Am I just like, okay, slide 50, is this from page 20 from the textbook? They're looking at, am I integrating audiovisual? Do I have discussion questions? Because I shouldn't just be like, oh, here's a clip from Aladdin now. And it has to be relevant, and it can't just be 20 clips and that's it. It also 5 is too much. It has to be within reason. I have to share a certain amount of theory. If it's optional to share audiovisual, but more than less, we definitely do. Am I doing questions? Am I interactive? So this is the way we've been told to taught. We're audited to make sure we actually do it. So it's not that would they take our word, they actually check. And like I told you, 6 years here, I have great reviews. They still do it to me. So they do it to everybody. So know that is our fundamental element at Ashton. Can you get that assurance at other colleges as well?
Amazing. Thank you so much. It's been
no problem.
such a pleasure chatting with you. I really hope that our attendees enjoyed the session. I'm sure that they got so much out of it. I'm a little jealous of the students who are going to get to take this next series of courses with you. And folks, again, whether you're joining us on Facebook Live, on Zoom, or if you're watching on YouTube, please reach out to us, 604-899-0803, or give us an email at info@ashtoncollege.ca. And thank you so much to our backend team as well, Rita and Matthew, for making this session run so smoothly. Thank you to all of our attendees, and of course, Jabeen, for your amazing insight on human resources. So have a great weekend, everyone.